Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Adrienne Meldrum. I'm the owner of Math for Middles, and I'm a certified multisensory math trainer. I've been trained under Marilyn Zecker over at asdec.org. And with me today is my awesome buddy and friend, Cara Scanlon. Cara, do you want to tell them a little bit about you?
I'm an educational therapist. I'm in the professional level of the Association of Educational Therapists, and I'm also on their board. I did my training for multisensory math through Making Math Real with David Berg in Oakland, California.
Awesome. Yeah, we love working together. We blend kind of the two methods and take some of the best stuff. And it's been really, really fun to do stuff with you, Cara. And with that, today we have a really great presentation for you about multisensory math. And we're going to just be skimming the iceberg here. There's so much more to learn and talk about, but we have jam-packed this session with a lot of really helpful tips. And I think you're going to really enjoy it today. So with that, let's get started with the slides. I'm going to turn on my screen share for us. So our session today is multisensory math techniques for the math reluctant OG tutor. Most likely you chose to become an OG tutor because you're passionate about dyslexia. And also you may be a little reluctant when someone asks you to help their child with math. And maybe your palms sweat a little at the idea of doing some higher levels of math. And you might panic when you think about teaching something beyond place value. But today, during our time together, you're going to learn about the CRA method and how to apply it in your lesson planning to make for a great math lesson. We'll make sure that you're going to learn about the curriculum that's available at your fingertips and any additional training that you can get to. And I think you're going to find that you'll feel a lot more confident by the end of our session. So with that, we're going to start with a little giggle. We've got a great little cartoon. We'll end with one too. This is Mark Anderson's Andertoons are fantastic. I'd like to meet you halfway, but you know, I'm pretty bad with fractions. I love that. I think it's great.
I feel like a lot of our students could relate.
I think so too. I think so too. He has a lot of really funny fraction cartoons. It was difficult to pick just one cartoon to put in this, but I think I picked a good one because it's adults. Adults feel intimidated by math too. So we are here to help you feel confident. That's the goal. And with that, let's talk about our plan and our goal for the session today. We want to talk about, is it dyscalculia or dyscalculia, depending on where you live? Is it that? Is it the math learning disability? Or is it something else that's causing a problem? Maybe it's their dyslexia that's causing an issue with the math. Or maybe it's their dysgraphia. Or maybe it's their sensory processing. We can talk about those things. It might be one of those, or it could be dyscalculia, but we're going to talk about when to know the difference between the two. And we want to discover and share with you what the processes are needed for being successful in math and show you how dyslexia affects math. And then how to take any curriculum that you know, and make it multisensory, because there is no perfect curriculum out there. But we're also going to share some curriculum that we like, because there are some that stand out from the others, but even still, they're not perfect. And we'll share where you can get additional training. And then we've got some awesome bonus stuff at the very, very end, which I think you're going to love. So are you ready? Let's jump in. Let's get this done. Okay, so true dyscalculia, let's start off right there. True dyscalculia really only affects about 5% of the school-age children. And so in a classroom of 30 students, that would be maybe 1 or 2 students. It's not very high. More likely, it's that their dyslexia is affecting it, their ADHD, or maybe their executive function, or maybe their anxiety. It could be so many other things than true dyscalculia. And true dyscalculia, it can be difficult to even diagnose, because it's all about qualities that the kid's having, things that they're showing that they're doing. And so it can be difficult to diagnose. I still feel like we're in our infancy. Wouldn't you agree, Cara, in our ability to diagnose?
And some recent research was showing that if one parent and a teacher is math phobic, students actually become math phobic as well. So there's all these different reasons for children not to like math that are not involved in dyscalculia that can make it look like it. And so that makes it even more complex. And, like I haven't heard many kids being diagnosed with dyscalculia where it's not actually dyscalculia, but I actually have had students. And it really ends up being a lot of times math anxiety rather than actual true dyscalculia.
That is so fascinating. So fascinating. I think one of our favorite researchers out there doing this work is Jo Boaler. She talks a lot about that math anxiety, math phobia, and how we unknowingly push it onto our students. And we say things like, I'm bad at math, so you must be bad at math too. No, everyone has a math brain, a wired brain for math, and it all comes down to really good instruction, and multisensory is part of that. So we'll talk about that later. So the other thing that we said we would talk about is sometimes it's all the other things, all the other co-occurring conditions that could be causing the issues with math. Yes, sure, it could be dyscalculia. They could have real problems with understanding number and magnitude, time, that kind of stuff. It could be, but it might be more likely that it could be dyspraxia or their dyslexia getting in the way, their ADHD, their executive functioning. Maybe it's their sensory processing, or they've got autism. They see things real black and white, and they might be really bothered by the fact that there's multiple ways to arrive at an answer. It could be causing issues, and it could be math anxiety. I know you worked with a student once, Cara, that it was purely math anxiety, and once you worked through it, she was fine.
Yeah, it was. So she came to me with a diagnosis of dyscalculia, and after 2 months, I called up the parents, and they were like, "Okay, can we just see how everything's going?" And I'm like, "I don't think I need to work with her anymore." And they're like, "No, no, 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 no. We'll keep working with you." But we ended up doing half an hour a week just to make sure that she could check in and she knew she had support. But she had this diagnosed dyscalculia because of how math phobic and how much math anxiety she had, that when she did her formal assessment, she couldn't do any math. And
Wow.
as soon as I got her out of that math anxiety, it was really clear that she was very math capable. It just, all these other things had been piling up to make it look like dyscalculia.
Wow. That is amazing. Amazing. And yeah, all learning's processed emotionally. So that makes complete sense to me that you would need to take care of that in order to learn. Love that. Love that. Okay, we could talk all day, like
Of course.
all day about this, all day. But let's keep going. So let's talk about what processes are needed to be successful in math. There's several. You need to have really good language and verbal retrieval skills. You've got to have working memory skills, executive function skills, and visual spatial skills. And if you're weak in one or several of these, you bet your math capabilities are going to be hindered by that. And so that's our goal as therapists, is to identify where are these weaknesses, but also where are their strengths with what those processes are, and let's use the strength to build the weakness. So we're going to go through what each of these processes are and what's needed, and we'll keep on trucking along. So let's look at the language and verbal retrieval skills. So let's do a little exercise here. When you have a child with dyslexia, often they learn to read by tying a word to an image. So a simple example would be pencil. A picture can easily be tied to this word, right? When I see the word pencil, I think of this. I think of the pencil. So students with dyslexia, though, they tend to skip over words like the, of, even this, at, because there's no visual that can be tied to this word. So their eyes are just going to skip right over it because it doesn't have meaning to them. If you have dyslexia and have a tendency to gloss over this word, it can be really problematic. Think of how important this tiny little word is. If I'm making 1/2 of 4, the child may be lost because they're not even really sure what it's asking. Because in their mind, of isn't really important. It has no value even. But in math, it's extremely important, and it has multiple meanings. And this is why we have to explicitly teach, Okay, I'm taking half of 4. I'm removing half of them. I'm taking 2 of them away out of that 4. This has to be explicitly taught and through a multisensory approach. So this is really important. So you can see how the language and how we talk about math makes a huge difference in the child understanding. Think of the word is. That means equal in math. But in English, it doesn't really have a whole lot of picture tied to it. But in math, it's super important. So language is really huge. Is there anything you want to add about that, Clara?
When all of those little words in English become big words in math, and some math words have different meanings in English than they do in math. So if you've learned one word and then you go to a math world, all of a sudden it's completely different. And you're supposed to know that and remember it. And all of those 4 components that we talked about, if one of those aren't strong, all of a sudden that breaks down. And a word problem becomes hard for a student who's very capable, but doesn't understand the meaning of the word.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Excellent, excellent example. So then we've got that working memory skills. We know a lot of our students with dyslexia have poor working memory skills, and this is part of why reading is hard for them. So let's look at this quote, this research from, I think we say Sean, I think is what we figured out. Sean Belak and her team studied the brain through MRI imaging and found that math facts are held in the working memory section of the brain. When you're doing addition and subtraction, it's over in the math side of the hemisphere. But as soon as we switch over to multiplication, it switches and moves over into the language side and in that working memory area. So this is why if you've got kiddos that can't remember the names of objects like my youngest or mixes up the order, the funny thing that he's been saying lately is, Mom, I gotta lawn the mow. I gotta lawn the mow. and, and then he's like, I mean mow the lawn. But he gets it mixed up. That is a classic example of how math facts are going to be hard for him, and they are because he struggles even just pulling basic names out for everyday objects and keeping them in the correct order. So I love that research. I'm so grateful for it because I rely on it heavily when I'm feeling discouraged about the math facts. It's okay.
Yeah. More time and patience. And
That's right. That's right. With working memory, we have what's called the inner eye. So visual information is here. It's used right here. And many of our students have very strong visual memory, and you'll find them looking at the sky or looking at the ground because their inner eye is used for that mental math and understanding magnitude, how big or small a number is. And this is their inner eye at work. They also have what's called the inner voice, which is what is used for finding and using those math facts or names for a number or writing dictated numbers. So for example, the child may be thinking of the number but struggles to write it down from that inner voice. The final piece of this is executive function. And this is what's used to keep sustained focus, push those distracting thoughts out, and regulate their emotions. So let's look closer at the executive function piece and what it takes to tackle the math homework. And I was going to have Cara lead us through the exhausting executive function skills it takes to turn in a math homework assignment.
And as adults, this might seem a little crazy, but if you remember way, way back in your memories, or maybe it wasn't an issue for you, but this is truly, I mean, this is me as a child to a T. So first, you need to get focused. And that means lots of different things, like understanding the directions of the homework. Because if you don't understand the directions, how are you supposed to focus on correctly what you're supposed to be doing? And I had a student that was a very big issue for, because if there's confusion, then they can't start. And do you understand what you were taught? So when you focus, can you then do the work? Or are you focusing and realizing you don't know what you're doing? And then you need to get support, but you're already at home. So there's a lot of, like, in each one of these numbers, there's a lot of interplaying going on with that. For
Absolutely.
Did you want to, I was going to say,
Oh,
you
I'm like,
have a good example.
That is such a good example.
And then when you record, so a lot of our kids with dyslexia, it's hard for them to write the words that they're thinking of. And that can be very similar with letters as well. And same for our dyscalculic students or anyone with any attentional issues. If you're thinking it, getting it on the paper like there's a long way from brain to hand to get it written down. You'd be surprised.
Absolutely.
So that recording the assignment accurately, remembering while you're writing it what the teacher expects from you when you're recording it, and not like showing your steps, because a lot of teachers want to see what you're thinking, but for a lot of students they forget because they're thinking it and they forget they
Yeah.
need to write it down.
Yeah. And then even if they, let's say they successfully wrote it down, getting it open when they get home to remember, most likely mom or dad are performing the executive function there. Open your planner. Let's see. Did you write it? No, you didn't write it.
Can you read what you wrote? That's another next
Yeah,
step.
can you read what you wrote? Oh, too funny.
And then we have work. So this is, I kind of skipped a little, but it's all also, they have to be ready to work. And what I do a lot of work with in our sessions, I know both of us do, is what does it feel like to be ready to work? Because knowing what that emotional state and physical state is can be really helpful for a student to then be able to do it. And I know we've joked a lot, what does it mean to focus? When a teacher in class says focus, well, like, what does that mean? Because that's a very, like we were talking about, the word focus doesn't have a image to go with it that's really clear and focused. Yes, we're a little silly. So that getting in that zone to do your work and show that you understand, show that you can understand the directions and all the other steps that we talked about, then you're ready to do it. And here for number 5, that recall. For some kids, it's inconsistent. So they remember it for the first question, they see the second question and it's slightly different, and all of a sudden they're recalling information incorrectly. So that having consistent memory, having somewhere to look when they forget, there's so many different parts in that. And then for number 6, like we talked about, how do you maintain focus? So then being focused to start with, but then maintaining your focus, especially when it's something you're not actually interested in, gets a little hard. And so that's where the number of problems can be really important, and why they're doing the homework can be really important to get buy-in from your students. But that, all of that already needs to be there for them to keep continuing doing their homework.
Totally. I so agree. And then even remembering how your teacher solved it. And then you find parents and kids spending hours on YouTube trying to watch something to jog that memory. I don't remember.
Exactly.
That's close to how my teacher did it, but not exact. I don't know.
I think my teacher did it that way.
Let's look at these next ones. We're almost through all the 12. I'm getting exhausted. I don't know about you. I'm like,
I
oh,
know.
so much involved.
And so after finishing even an individual question, not just the whole homework, checking your work. So some kids are just exhausted from finishing the question, why do I have to check my work? And this is a really great executive functioning step to have modeled and have that habit already in place, because as the math problems get harder, and like from elementary school to middle school to high school to college, when they know they need to check their work, they're going to think more deeply before they start their problem about what they actually need to do and what's a reasonable answer. So that's why checking your work is so important. And then I can't tell you how many times I personally or any of my students have forgotten to label their homework. So whose is it? How are you supposed to get the points?
No joke. I seriously bought for my son a name stamper because
Brilliant.
it was so exhausting to like write your name on your own paper. And then the stamper was like almost novelty like, right? But he didn't use it as much as he thought because he was a little bit embarrassed by like this in class, which caused him to remember to write his name on this paper. But yeah, I'm with you. I can't tell you how many kids will come to me and be like, well, I know I did the homework because I did it with you, but it's not in the thing. It's probably in the no-name basket. So frustrating.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Okay, I'll quit interrupting. And then the last, this is classic.
Well,
Number
having
nine.
a set place or just a place to put homework, but
Mm,
then making sure it's in the right place. So when the teacher asks, okay, I need your homework, they know where to go and get it. And that's where, having that consistency is really important, having a place to put it in. But, you know, what happens when you lose your backpack?
no joke. And or you can't even find it in your folder because you have every single piece of paper from the beginning of the year. So then you end up doing the same assignment 3, 4 times,
Mhm,
which is
exactly.
more repetition than you really need that skill. Oh
More,
goodness.
you land into the frustration area rather than good practice area. And
Mm-hmm.
like we've been saying, is trying to find your homework. What depending on your organizational system and what's been modeled to students, I like to remind myself, executive functioning doesn't start developing until like sixth grade, and for some kids even later.
Even
So
later. Isn't
sixth grade is
complete
ideal.
until they're in their 20s. I mean, it's a process for sure. Yes.
And
Yes.
helping with that is super important. And then, like we talked about, losing the backpack.
Yep.
But making so I've different students have told me like they're not allowed to bring their backpacks into class, or they can't have a locker, so they have to carry their backpack with them at all times. And there's so many different ways they can lose whatever it is that they're bringing to school with their homework. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I so agree. And if they successfully turn that in, wow. I mean, you and I, we know now that took 12 steps and that kid did it. That is something to celebrate. Something to celebrate right there. Okay, so I love that. I mean, that's a lot of executive function pieces, let alone that there's a lot of executive function pieces happening within doing the math too. And
Hmm.
that's difficult as well. But that's another topic for another day. Let's jump into kind of the signs of children that are struggling. Let's look at those together. I'm sure you can spot the child pretty quickly, the one that's struggling with math. But we wanted to share with you some other kinds of signs and things to look for, that also might be kind of pointing towards true dyscalculia. It doesn't mean that they have it, but these are some of those signs that maybe an assessor would be looking at for sure. So we have finger counting, finger counting. And if they're finger counting, it's not that it's a bad thing. That's okay. That's multisensory. But are they miscounting when they use their fingers? Are they counting some fingers maybe 2 times? And do they know that they have 5 fingers on one hand and 5 on the other? And I know that sounds crazy to say that out loud, but no, really, there's some kids that do not realize that. For one of my students, we talked about actually the sensory experience would be to count your fingers, and he was going to use nail polish because it has a very specific feeling as he's counting. He was going to paint each finger and count them, and that's helpful because he needed to know. He didn't think he had 10 fingers on a consistent basis because of that. It was difficult. Do they move their fingers but count completely inaccurately? That one-to-one correspondence isn't really working out for them. So that's definitely some things to be looking at. And again, we don't think finger counting is bad, but you need to pay attention to what's happening in the finger counting itself. And you want to move the student towards using their brain for the counting and remove the need to use your fingers over time. It's not something, I find that I do it when I'm super tired. I'm like, I can't do it. I gotta touch and tap. And we should allow our students to have that same access. And then can they count the dots on dominoes and dice? That again too is almost like finger counting, one-to-one correspondence.
Hmm.
Um, subvocalizing. Subvocalizing is super awesome, right, Cara?
Oh yes, you'll hear me around the house doing it all the time.
Absolutely. So are you hearing them talk under their breath as they work? Are they whisper talking? Maybe they're not whisper talking. Maybe they're talking really loud, but are they whisper talking when they're counting mostly? Like, pay attention to those. We do want them to sub vocalize when they're working, but eventually move into most of the vocalizing happening in their head. But sub vocalizing might be an indication that there might be something bigger going on. And then we have the visualizing piece, which we've talked about. This is huge. Cara, I'm sure you've had many of students do this. Are they looking up in the air?
And then do they pause? And
Yes.
almost as if they didn't hear the question
Yes,
because they have to
absolutely. They
think.
have to think. Or are they looking down at the ground? Those are huge. That's a visualizing thing, and then let's go over the time. Do they understand the days and weeks in the month? If they, again, that's like sequencing, that might be really hard. That has to do with directionality, position. Can they tell time on an analog clock? I
This is a
hear
really good one,
I
even for
hear so
dyslexics.
many people, right? Yes,
Mhm.
it's so hard. But yeah, it can be taught, and it's important actually to learn an analog clock. We had an episode on our podcast with Leslie Jossel, and we were talking about how important analog clocks are because digital ones only reveal to us the present moment, whereas an analog clock allows us to visualize time and be aware of how much time has gone by, but also plan for time and be able to see it visually and in terms of fractions of the hour. I loved that episode. So you got to look at that. We'll link it up in our PDF for this session so that you can go and listen to it. It was awesome. It was really, really helpful. And then there's that magnitude piece. Magnitude. What do we mean by magnitude? Do they understand quantity? That's what we mean. How big something is, how little something is. Magnitude. Place value, those giant, giant numbers.
My stepsister, I have a new game with her. She calls it the math game. We just use a calculator. She doesn't know that yet. And she puts all these numbers in, and then I tell her, compared to the Earth, the solar system, or the universe, how big the number is. And so I know right now it doesn't really have any meaning. She's 5 years old, but she gets really excited that she can make a really big number. And I know later on that's going to be really helpful for her to understand how big in comparison certain numbers are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Like sorting numbers too according to their size. And that's all a really important piece of understanding the magnitude, how small and big something is. And then we have those fractional parts too. That's an important part of magnitude as well. So those are just some of the signs that you would want to look at in a child that's struggling. And it could be true dyscalculia, but it also could be that dyslexia is affecting these things, or it could be any of those things that we talked about. So we wanted to talk, though, more specifically about dyslexia and how it affects math. So I think you're going to really enjoy this piece. Hang with me here. It's a lot to take in. Are you ready for this? So one piece that we know has a big part to do with dyslexia is the idea of directionality and position. So think about when we're reading left to right, top to bottom, and that is true for everything you read. And directionality is hard for a lot of children. Cara and I were talking just the other day, and she said, "Oh, I read a super good article on the Mighty." So we thought we'd pull it out and pull this piece in because it was perfect. So Leslie Templeton wrote about it. And again, this is linked up in the PDF, so you can go read the article for yourself. But she said, my dyslexia makes it difficult to understand sequencing and directionality. I don't know left, right, and up, down. These take me a second to process. Also, now, then, here, there, before, after, and so on really confuse me. And below that, she talked about learning to tie her shoes was exhausting. And I just chuckled and yep, that was extremely hard for my youngest, and it's still painful to watch him do to this day. So yes, sequencing and directionality is a huge, huge piece. Do you want to add anything there, Cara, about that?
And these are things, again, that I feel like this is why dyslexia a lot of times called the hidden disease. Um, and that we can talk about that name, but it's very hidden. And there's certain things where it pops up. And when it pops up, that can create anxiety. And so the idea of left and right, up and down, for me, I work with math all day long. Horizontal and vertical is incredibly difficult for me. I have to spend at least 2 seconds when I say horizontal, horizon, horizon. Okay, we're going to use the horizontal axis to graph this. And my students, a lot of, like, they'll get used to it, but some of them are like, what's taking her
Mhm.
so long? And,
Mhm.
And so I have to remember what horizontal is.
I love that you shared that. I love that you shared that. And I don't think we mentioned that at the beginning that you have dyslexia. This
Yes.
is something you're intimately acquainted with. So it's one of the many reasons I love to chat with you about it. So let's look at how that affects math. So in young children, being able to share which shape is above the square may be hard to say. Above, they might be like, I don't know. Or how about which shape is before the star? So practicing these skills is important because in math, it's directional heavy. And the rules can change just about any time. And we're going to show you the progression of how directionality changes all the way up to algebra. So let's go explore. Let's dig a little deeper. So think about the direction for adding numbers and how it compares to what we do in reading. When we read, we're reading left to right, top to bottom. And in math, we don't follow this directional pattern at all. We start here at the left to identify which operation are we working with here. Then we shift all the way to the right. And we're going to work now towards the left, starting here at the ones column. And now we have to go left and all the way out. So, I mean, that's
Almost the
really difficult.
opposite of reading.
Right? It's the opposite. So you can see why, like, this is difficult. This is hard for students. Let's look at the number line. Cara brought this up the other day. Like, the number line, think about how it doesn't follow the rules either. So it's closely tied to the directionality of reading when they're little. We've got these numbers that grow larger as we scan from left to right, right? That fits the rule. But consider what happens when we change those directionality to the positive and negative numbers. That's not really working.
I remember in 6th grade when we were doing the timeline, and exactly what you said, all of a sudden that switch, and I had to like look around the entire room because the timeline was around the entire room to figure out what was going on because I just couldn't understand.
Right? Yes, directionality. So yeah, here again, we've got, well, yeah, kind of left to right, but it starts in the middle here at 0. And then we've got this directionality of going right to left at 0, and the numbers are getting bigger. The quantity is increasing negatively. It's increasing positively to the right. Like, it just doesn't, it's hard. So we use vertical number lines a lot of time when we switch over to integers because that's easier to understand. Up and down kind of follows the natural pattern of life. And then we introduce the horizontal number line because it makes more sense by that point. And then look at how this ties into matrices. This is an algebra concept. Directionality and position can cause real problems for the algebra student. It makes my brain hurt to do matrices. I have to really think hard about the directionality of it. It's, we've got the rows and the columns, and it's about matching the row and the column into the next matrix. It's exhausting to keep the directionality and positioning correct. And we have to practice and explicitly teach these skills to students. And I did that with my son this year, and we played some gross motor activities to help with the positions, with all that words to help him get that down. And so we wanted to share with you just a few tips for helping with this directionality and position piece. And we really believe that the key here is gross motor. Gross motor is where it's at when it comes to working with this. It really can help anchor the brain. So they need activities where the student's up and out of the chair. They're drawing problems on a huge sliding glass window, huge, with a dry erase marker so they can get that motion. I'm circling the sign. I'm following the line. I'm going to start over here on the right. That is huge, big gross motor. Think of handwriting. That's a directional heavy activity too. So I did this with a student. I had him stand up, and his mom wrote with her hand on his back the directionality for 3. Then she turned around and he wrote it on her back. And his reversal stopped real quickly after just a few practice sessions of writing on the back because it was gross motor, which was excellent. Before we started recording, we were talking about how awesome vertical number lines are and how we can make that gross motor. So you could take a wrapping paper tube, the core, when you're done with it, and draw some marks on it and have that be your vertical number line, students, oh, it's just so awesome. They can put their hand, okay, I'm starting at -3 and I'm adding 5 and I can move my hand up and they can feel that motion. My hands are moving up. You could go draw the number line outside. They could hop back and forth, back and forth. Awesome, awesome gross motor activities. And then I mentioned that I played position puppy with my son. For matrices, we were practicing rows and columns and numbers like first, second, third. So I would say things like, put the puppy on second column, third row, and he would move the puppy there. Now put the puppy on first column, second row. And that's just practicing the language again and getting used to the moving and the positioning before we even touched a matrice. That's the activity we did for our gross motor. Is there anything you want to add about this piece of the gross motor?
Any way you can make it physical? I mean, that's the whole multisensory part of math, multisensory math. Any way you can make it physical or have a real world way to involve it. I mean, puppies are always good too.
Yeah, absolutely. Puppies are the best. Okay, that was awesome. Now we're going to really blow your mind open. Are you guys ready? We're going to talk about the multisensory math. And we're going to take any standard textbook. No joke, this textbook example is from 1990 something. I scanned the pages. We're going to use them and we're going to show you how we're going to interject it and make it multisensory. So we use what we mentioned at the beginning, the CRA approach. In reading, it might be VAKT. It's similar idea. So we use the C, that's concrete, so that's things you can touch. The R is representational, that's a picture, that's what you're seeing here. And then we have A for the abstract, that's just the numbers, only the numbers. And we're going to use all three of these almost simultaneously, one after another. You don't teach one day. Well, we're only doing hands-on on Monday. On Tuesday, we're going to do the R, and on Wednesday, we're going to do the A. No, they need to be right next to each other. So we move rapidly between those three things. And the method that we use for lesson planning, we're using the research from Dr. Joyce Steeves. She's an OG fellow. She came up with a math method for OG, and this is kind of close to her lesson plan. If you want to learn more about the lesson plan, I think you should go get this book. It's available in the Barnes & Noble Nook store. It's not available in print. You have to do a digital book only. It's about $20, which is pretty affordable. But I will warn you, the formatting is wonky. I've complained to Cara about it several times. Whoever formatted that book, the font's huge and small, huge and small. It was exhausting to read, but excellent, excellent for lesson planning. So that's what we use. So I'm going to show you how the lesson plan works really quick. So let's start right here at the top. The warm-up is always, always, always something previously learned. It's never new information at the beginning. And it's a short amount of time. So a quick warm-up, 2-3 minutes, something quick. Could be a game, just could be some practice problems, some kind of warm-up that they already are comfortable with. They already know the skill. Dr. Steeves believed that we should be counting every single day. In fact, we have some really cute shirts that say count every day, because we believe it too. You should be counting things every single day. So there's some sort of counting activity in the lesson plan, and I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. Then board work can be where the gross motor piece is. The kids are up and out of the chair. They're manipulating different things. They're moving their bodies in order to connect the body and the mind. Then we have the mental arithmetic piece. This is where we're working on our working memory skills. We're holding numbers in our head and we're manipulating the number. That's a really important piece. Then we have the discussion part. This is where you can teach new vocab. You can do your etymology for different math words. You could talk about fractions. Okay, fract, it means to break. Fractions, we're breaking things, we're dividing things. You could also talk about word problems in this case. You could do a word problem together. And then we have our new concept, and this is where the CRA comes in. We're going to teach them a new concept using these three, and this is about 20 minutes. Then we have the student practicing this new skill, and Dr. Steeves believes it should be totally silent during that time. I've completely failed at that. I struggle, to be completely silent. I find that I'm often like giving cueing words, and to help them keep going, and or like, oh, use your reference over here, your new point reference.
My favorite
Um,
is when students are like, no, don't say anything. I'm like, I think you got it now.
yeah, I've had kids do that too. Can you just? Okay, sorry. Then we wrap it up with some sort of review game that helps us review everything that we did that day. And this whole lesson plan can be done in about an hour. If you've got an older student, sometimes 90 minutes, but usually about an hour. Sometimes I never make it to the review game. Depends on the kids' processing speed. Sometimes we're lucky to just get through a few problems of written computation. Okay, are you ready? The other really important thing, and I need you to understand this, everything leading up to the new concept needs to be sub-skills that build and support the new concept. So I'm going to show you how that works. Let's do this. Let's go into the textbook.
Mhm.
So 1990 something, a lesson about powers and exponents. Okay, that's our new concept. I can just plug that in. I know that that's what we're going to do. I'm not going to worry too much about the CRA right this moment, but I'm just plugging in by looking at this textbook. Okay, we're learning about powers and exponents. Then my brain's like, oh, hey, look, this page has some vocab that's needed. That would be a really good use of our discussion time. So we're going to talk about power, base, and even though factor isn't bolded, I think it's worth mentioning. So I added that. We're going to remind them what a factor is and what an exponent is, and we'll put that in the discussion piece. Then my brain went to, exponents and powers, well, that's all about repeated multiplication, which is a pattern. So, and I know in the previous part of the chapter, we were doing visual and number patterns. So let's use that for our warm-up because it supports repeated multiplication. Then I'm thinking, okay, we got to get some gross motor in here. We could do some clapping of a pattern. And immediately my brain's thinking of clean. You could do stomp, stomp, clap, stomp, stomp, clap, and have them describe the patterns, or we could clap out a repeated multiplication too. You could clap twice, put a pause, clap 4 times, and they can identify, oh, you're multiplying by 2 every time, something like that. That's a fantastic way to use the board work thing. Then we have the mental arithmetic part. We could be using dice patterns and having them hold the quantity. Maybe it's a domino of 9 or something. And they've been working on the 6 times table. So let's multiply everything by 6 today. And you could talk about, hey, did you notice any patterns during our mental arithmetic time? We were always multiplying by 6, blah, blah, blah. And then we can do some counting. We could do what I call pull down counting, and you're going to use little unit cubes. If you have unit cube linkers, you could put some up on the top of the page and pull them down and count by 2s. Pull them down 2, 4, 6, 8. Count up to 30, let's say, and then count backwards from 30. And counting backwards is always a slow and laborious process, but so needed, so needed. Then I go, all right, let's grab some written computation. I do not try to reinvent the wheel. Don't reinvent the wheel. That's why we had a caveman in our presentation. Don't reinvent the wheel. It's not worth it.
Mm-mm.
Just come up with some practice problems. Grab the book, look through the book, pick some problems. That's part of your lesson. Then you do that review piece. So let's look at the new concept part. I didn't worry about that. I plugged all the other pieces in. Now I'm going to focus on the new concept. And this book, I didn't have to reinvent the wheel. They were like, "Ooh, hands-on." And I'm thinking about all the teachers I ever had. I remember seeing these sections in my book. They never did these. Never. Just glossed over them. But here we go. They gave us a multisensory method we can use here, and we're folding paper and exploring that repeated multiplication. So I'm going to throw that in there. We're going to fold some paper. Then I'm going to tie it to the real world, cell division, or a dog walking business, where you can keep hiring dog walkers and look how you're exponentially growing here. Talk about that, how it just takes off. And we can talk about how we can share our discovered pattern. I always talk to my students about that. Ooh, that's a really cool pattern. How could we describe it to someone else in numbers so they can do it too? That's what math's all about, is communicating found patterns. Then we do the whole repeated multiplication, and we can talk about and introduce that it can be written as a power, and we can draw it in pictures. We could start doing some patterns. Maybe it's a pattern dot of 3, and then it turns into 9, and keeps going. 27, blah, blah, blah. Pictorial, right? And explain the parts of the power and give them a near point reference for understanding how a power is made and written. And then we can just start doing the abstract. Now we've got a really clear visual of what an exponent is, and we can practice using it in just number form and doing that evaluate the exponents, right? That's the prompt in the textbook, evaluate the exponents. So that's how we're going to get through it in 20 minutes. Not too hard. I did not have to reinvent the wheel. It came all from that textbook just because I used Dr. Steve's method and applied it here to whatever textbook you want. We want the same thing for you guys. It's pretty easy. So we highly recommend it. Anything you want to add, Cara, about that?
It also, when you keep that pattern going, students with any sort of anxiety, attentional issues, dyscalculia, or dyslexia, they know what the pattern is. And when they get in that pattern and that habit, it's really helpful. So they know what's coming next. So they're ready to do some warm-up problems. They're ready for each of those. And it's almost, I remember when I stopped going to educational therapy when I was in high school, like Monday nights, I was like, I need to get things done. And like, it was this weird pattern, and it's really great. So if you can, the more consistency you have, initially, it's going to make it even easier as your sessions go on, and your students are going to be ready for it without like mentally knowing why sometimes.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I love that. I love that. So we wanted to show you too, you can have more than just a regular textbook, okay? We love the dyscalculia solution. It's fantastic. It can carry you quite far, probably about to fifth grade level, maybe. Now it is British based, so they're going to have a little bit different terminology like maths, and they don't say wands, they say units. So, and that makes sense because they have a different customary unit than we do. So be aware of that. So the language is slightly different, but you can adjust it to the American way pretty easily. So we really like this book, and we thought it would be really fun to show you one of the games in there. This is the worst name, and I told Cara maybe I would come up with a better name, but I didn't. So this is Flibbered, Flibbered, Flibber Gibbet, Flibber Gibbet. I don't know.
Liberty Gibbet.
Every time I try to say it, it comes out different. We're just going to go with it. We'll just call it Flib. We're going to play Flib it. So this is the game. It's pretty easy. I bet you have these materials. This came right from this book, but you will need some base 10 blocks, 2 number dice. Now these are dice with the written number, not the pattern. And then you need a dice that has a +1, -1, +10, -10. And +10, -10 is on there twice because it's 6-sided dice. And I didn't have one, so I just made one really quick, which I'll show you. And then you're going to need a hundreds chart. Okay, so you guys, should we play it? What do you think? Yeah?
I think so.
Okay. Here's the game. What did we call it? Flibberly Gibbet?
Yeah. Well, flip it. We'll call it Flib.
Flib. We're going to play Flib. And it's found inside of this book, but I wanted to show you. I don't know about you. I always feel like gypped by the previews, on Amazon. I want to show you a little bit of the book too, so you can see lots and lots of descriptions on how to do it. I love that they have the same philosophy we do about pattern because they have the same access to research as we do. So you're going to get a lot of information. There's also another book called Dyscalculia Assessment, I think. I'm going to link to it. But you can use that too to look at your kiddos and see where they're at mathematically. They have an assessment you can use too. But the manipulatives in this book are real simple. Cuisinart rods, base 10 blocks. You can see here, this is the kind of equipment you'll need to do the things in here. I love their activity about teaching the teen numbers and 20, 30, talking about the weirdness of the English language there. So it's a really, really helpful book. Okay, here's our Flib game that we're going to play. So you need dice like this. We've got these dice. these super cool pyramid kind of dice. And then you need a +10, -10. And I have no idea where this dice came from. I think it might be from a weird Lego game my kids had once. But I just took a silver Sharpie and wrote +10, -10, +1, you know, all of those. You're going to need paper and a pencil and your hundreds chart, which we have right here, and 2 colored markers for your 2 players. Okay, so the game goes like this. We're going to roll the dice and make 2 numbers, and then we'll build that quantity. And then the next player takes a turn. And anyway, so you both take a turn building your quantity. And then the player rolls a -10. You see that? And then the other player does a rolls and gets a -10 as well. And then they cross out 1. And so the game is whoever gets the first 3 in a row, and that needs to be horizontally, vertically, or diagonally, they win. So just to show you, I'm not going to show the whole game. We don't have enough time for that. But there we go. Okay, I've got 38 here. I've got 38. I'm going to move this over here for a minute. I've got 38, so I'm going to build 3, and I'm going to make my pattern of 8 with a 5 and a 3. That's a decomposition of 8. I explicitly teach my kiddos about decompositioning numbers. So we've got that here, okay? Then I would roll it again from what it was saying and build another quantity, and then I pick one, and I'm gonna subtract whatever comes up here. Okay, so I have 38 minus 1. Lucky duck me. That's 37. So I can cross out 37 on the board. Okay, and then the other opponent will do the same thing, and then whoever gets the first 3 in a row is the winner. And so obviously the skills here that we're playing is we're learning about place value, we're learning about quantity, the magnitude, and again, it's so multisensory. Awesome yumminess over here. So there's lots of games in here. We love Dyscalculia Solution. There's lots of cool skills that you can work on in here. You're going to really enjoy this book. And Brian Butterworth, he's a great researcher on the multisensory method. Love him. So we just want to give you a really quick taste. Like, go out, buy this book. It's only maybe $40. It's totally worth your money. Totally worth your money to go get that book. It's going to give you a lot of ideas. So we were going to talk about Pyramid Solitaire. Oh my goodness, one of my favorite games. Now,
Yes.
there's 2 levels to playing Pyramid Solitaire. Level 1, we're playing and we're trying to make friends of 10, basically. That's the goal. Then level 2, which is a little harder, but is probably my favorite, is making 13. And 13 causes our kiddos to learn to be a little more flexible in their thinking.
Very
And
flexible.
I find myself now, I'm kind of weird. I've played this game so much. When I'm adding like a big column of numbers, I find myself making 13s, which is kind of weird. I'll make 13s and then I'm like, oh, look, there's a 7. Now I've got 20, you know? That's what the benefits of this game is, but it teaches you to be a little bit flexible thinker. So we were going to show you, Cara and I and my team, we've developed these super cool cards. They're subitizing cards. So we're going to show you how this makes the game really super fun. You can play with a regular deck of cards. Sure, you totally could. But we're kind of a big fan of our cards because they involve subitizing, which is pattern recognition. So we're going to show you how to set it up really quick. Okay, so Pyramid Solitaire is super fun because it's something the student can play by themselves. This is our super awesome deck of cards, which are available to purchase here soon. So be sure to check out the link because you're going to want a deck. I have a feeling. They're awesome. I'm not just lying here. They're so yummy. I love them. So Pyramid Solitaire is awesome because a student can play it independently. But of course, when the first few times you play, you're going to want to be nearby. So it's pretty simple to set it up. What you do is you start with 1 card here at the top, and we're going to build a pyramid with 7 rows. So I'm going to do that. And every row has the same amount of cards as the row number it is. So row 1 has 1 card, row 2 has 2 cards, row 3 has 3 cards, and so on. So I'm going to keep going here. We've got our tally marks. Oh, the tally marks are delightful. Oh, a blank one. I'll have to pull the wild cards out too. There might be a wild card or two that snuck in there.
We don't want to make it too easy for them.
Upside down 11. Okay, almost got it set up here. Aren't these emojis funny? They crack me up. And again, these cards, we're trying to use pattern so that we make it easy to identify the numbers. Almost there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One more row.
Getting so close.
Getting so close.
The heart-eyed emojis, those are my favorite.
Aren't they adorable? Yes. I feel like this most days though. Okay. And ooh, we got a queen. Look how cute our queen is. Our queen and king and jack are really cute. And what I like about it is the numbers on there. This is a 12, technically. Yes. Okay. So with Pyramid Solitaire, this is second level. A 13 would be considered a free card. You just would pull it out. But the goal is to take 2 cards and add them up to 7. That's 7. Sorry, I said that out loud because I was looking at 7. Add them up to 13. And then you have a draw deck here, and I'm going to put it up here in this corner. So you can scan here on this first row, and you're looking for pairs of 13. Cara, do you see any?
Well, we have the 1 and the queen, right?
The 1 and the queen, that's right. So 12 plus 1 makes 13. So you would pull those out. And all of these cards are locked. If something is on top of it, you can't use it. That's something important to mention. So these are active here. We can use those. And if we can't find a match, then we pull here from there. Do you see any others, Cara?
I'm not seeing, and we can only use 2 cards, right?
That's right. You can only use 2 cards.
My goal, I always want to use more than 2 when I can't, but it doesn't count.
Yes, exactly. I don't see any. So we have a 6, and I know that 6 plus 7 makes 13. So I'm going to pull those out. And the nice thing too about this is they're sub-vocalizing too a lot. They're saying, okay, I've got these numbers. Okay, let's see. 4 and 9, 4 and 9, 4 and 9. Do I have any 4 and 9? No, I don't have any of those. You're going to hear them just whisper, 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 talk, talk, talk. They're getting those out.
Watch us. We didn't notice the pattern because of the dice. So the dice on the lower left-hand corner is 9, and then we have a 4. Right?
A 9 and a 4? Yes. Way to call us out. Yes, 9 and 4, pull it out. So that's the general gist of the game. We'll stop here, but the goal is to get the whole deck gone. And that happens very rarely. I'm going to be honest. It's pretty hard. But when it happens, I mean, talk about celebrate. Take a picture. Tag your kid on my account. Like, I will celebrate with them because I know how hard it is to win. We need a winner's circle, in my opinion, for Pyramid Solitaire. Yes. So that's the game. A Hall of Fame for Pyramid Solitaire, especially level 2. Level 1, yeah, you can easily get rid of that whole deck. But as soon as we make it 13, it's really, really difficult. Okay, let's get back to it. We've got just a few more things to share, and then we're going to be done. Okay, so let's go over the curriculum really quick. We're in the home stretch here. So curriculum that supports the CRA approach, we have Math UC. It's a really popular one. Comes with all the kits you can think of in the world. There's a British one called Maths No Problem. This is a big fan that I know that loves this one is Cynthia, my buddy Cynthia that works with us. She loves Maths No Problem. She made some tremendous growths with her students when she lived in the UK. So it's a UK program, but feel free to use it here. Again, you just would adjust the language slightly. Then there's Bridges. I really have liked Bridges. However, it's not available for you to purchase as like a therapist, but schools have access to it. But what I do, this is my cheater route, I guess, is I look for Bridges Home Connection. Every website seems to have those, and they they're easily found just by doing a quick Google search, but you can use some of the examples from there in your lessons and get ideas on how to do different skills according to the grade level. So that's how I kind of get around it, but I really like Bridges. They do almost everything just the way I would do it, except for they don't use tally marks. And I wish they did, because tally marks make it so much easier so we're not onesie twosie counting. And then there's the CPM curriculum. They use lots of hand-to-mind manipulatives in their books. And the books themselves, the curriculum, is a little dry, like it looks a little boring. It's all black and white. But I like the methods that they have, the tile activities that they use, like especially at the higher levels of math, really good. They do algebra tiles and all of that. So those are some curriculums you can look at. I was trained by Marilyn Zecker, who she spends a lot of time reading the research. And what I love about her is she takes the mega important piece of language and interjects it into the multisensory method. When I started using her language in my sessions, oh my goodness, understanding went through the roof. They're really getting it. And then there is Making Math Real. That's Kara's wheelhouse. What would you say about the Making Math Real method?
The shortest thing I can say about Making Math Real is what I truly love is how it's taught at the youngest grades. It goes through and is consistently taught in older grades, so that when you are teaching a student one way, it's consistent all the way. And so that's really helpful with kids with ADHD or on the autism spectrum, but really for all kids anyways. Like learning something consistently so you can remember it later and effectively use it is so important.
Oh, yes. A fantastic quick example of that. I think you and I were talking one day about factoring, and the AAC method is what they call it with the X,
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about, oh, well, you said in Making Math Real, we use those at the younger grade levels. And yet and look at this, they're used all the way up into high school. That's where it comes from.
They start as a game really young, and then all of a sudden when they get to factoring, it's no big deal, which is really nice. And that's, again,
Really nice.
it creates this consistency, so it's no longer scary. It's like, oh, I already know how to do that. That's not a
Yeah,
big deal.
that's not a big deal. What? Factoring? I got this. Then there's Wooden Math. Wooden Math, he's got a lot of training over there, lots of classes that you can take. I think a lot of them are on the East Coast. Making Math Real is California. Marilyn Zecker does online and in person. And then we have Mortensen Math, which is an interesting one. The website doesn't match up. You'll see what I mean when I link to it. But Mortensen Math is fascinating. The amazing things that you could do with base 10 blocks for like algebra just blows my mind. Morton's Math is really interesting. There's a lot to digest over there, lots of trainings you can take. And so those are just some of the few that stand out and shine that we thought we would share. And then we wanted to just show you, this is actual data from one of our students about the power of multisensory math. And you can see how he's gaining. The blue bar is his first time. The gray bar is his second time through the assessment. And what I think my favorite is, look at him getting tested on something he was never able to be tested on before, with the positives and the negatives. I was just really excited about that. And he's maxing out the place value. He maxed out his number sense. He maxed out fractions. Like I was just, pleased as peaches. I was really, really excited.
It was awesome. And so was the parent.
Yes, the parents were really excited too. And that's how effective multisensory math can be. And you can see that took some time. It took some time, yes, but being consistent and keep working at that multisensory method works. And then we thought we would just share, like, if you're curious more about what multisensory math can do for people, we love to share the case studies. And I'll be honest, our case studies were kind of funny. We get some really hilarious moments with these kids, but it's some of the most rewarding work we do. And if you want to read more about it, you can. And then insider tip as well, we try to do a video every Tuesday about multisensory math. We take a break in the summers, but we'll be picking it up again in late August, just in time for school to get back. But every Tuesday, there's some sort of video about multisensory math, some sort of skill that we may be talking about. But you can view the old ones on our YouTube channel, on our website, and on Facebook. And with that, I told you we would end with a funny. After all this information, I don't know about you, my head's about ready to explode. I need a little giggle. So Adrienne Hedger, she's awesome. I had her make this cartoon for us because we had a funny chat about how kids get out of doing, homework, math homework specifically. My kids use this one a lot. They get really chatty. Oh my gosh, I didn't tell you what happened last Monday. La 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 la. Or they
Mm-hmm.
suddenly remember that they need to do that chore. Oh, I have to deep clean that bathroom right now. Got to do it. Or they encounter a user error. I've seen this one happen many a times. I erased too hard and it ripped the paper, burned a hole in it, or
Can't do any more math.
can't do any more math. It's ruined. Or they become so famished, they're so hungry, they're so thirsty, they got to take care of that first, which I support actually. Go take care of those needs and then let's try again. Or they suddenly care about that personal hygiene. Oh, I forgot to take a shower. Or my favorite, they slowly disappear. They just start sliding like they're melting to a puddle on the floor. Why are you sliding off your chair? Stop sliding, stop. Okay, all right. You made it this far. Don't give up on us yet because remember that amazing story about Kara talking about anxiety? That's our bonus. She's going to share really quick 5 tips, 5 things that are simple to implement that are going to help lower the anxiety. Are you ready, Kara, to take it away?
Yeah. One thing that I found that's super important with my students is kind of it has to do with that comic we just talked about is making sure they feel comfortable. So a lot of times students come and they haven't gone to the bathroom all day because they're so anxious and tied up and so really like Adrienne said, letting them go to the bathroom, letting them get something to drink, letting them get something to eat. I know it is an avoidance behavior, but once they have that and they can feel more settled, then we're ready to go. I had one student who the first 5 minutes of every session, she would go get food and come back. But as soon as she got that food, she was ready to go. And it was kind of her way of mentally preparing for a session, or really it was her way of mentally preparing for something she didn't want to do with something that she liked to do, eat. Who doesn't like eating? We have to eat to live. So she would get
Absolutely.
that food, feel ready to go. And so kind of helping them settle, and that also plays into making them feel like that emotional state or that physical state of what they need to have to feel prepared. So that's also really important because a lot of students that I know, they don't know what focus means. They don't know what being prepared for class is. And it's funny because they can be the perfect student in English, but it doesn't translate to math for them. I had a high school student, a college student actually, who failed 5 times statistics, and she needed it to graduate from college.
Oh,
And that 5th time, I head of the program was like, we need to do something different. And I just sat down and I talked to her and I was like, what are you doing in math class? She's like, I take notes, but I don't really understand them. And I'm like, well, what are you doing in English class? She's like, well, I take notes and then I rewrite them. And then if I don't understand anything, I talk to my teacher. And I was like, well, why don't we do that for math? And it ended up, and this is where I like to talk about, like, a lot of times it isn't dyscalculia because it looked like it for everyone. She failed 5 times, and that's a lot of money in college. But what ended up happening is she wasn't treating math class like a class. She was treating it like this thing that she didn't want to do. And so as soon as she started treating it like a math class, she had great questions for the teacher. She had great questions for me, and she ended up passing. And so little things like that, making them feel comfortable, they have all these skills already. Or another student, I bought her a beautiful pen set that was erasable, so she didn't have to have any anxiety around making a mistake, because that's where a lot of her math anxiety came from. So she had this beautiful set of colors, and she was very, very artistic. She was at an art school, and she would then make her notes beautifully colorful. And so that's using one of their strengths to engage them in something that they're not enjoying. And so she would use her beautiful artistic skills and make impeccable notes. And that really helped her engage and actually sit in math class and pay attention, because she didn't have this overwhelming feeling of like heaviness and just despair. That little step was amazing. And so there's lots of little things you can do like that, where really listen to what your student is going through and make it legitimate. I mean, I always remember, like sometimes they come to me with problems and I'm like, oh man, if you only knew what it was like to be an adult. But that is the thing. It's kind of like when a
yeah.
baby surprise, it is literally the worst thing they've ever experienced. And so for some of these middle schoolers or high schoolers, it is literally the worst thing that they're experienced. And not to downplay that, to be like, oh man, life's going to get harder, because it is hard. It's legitimately hard. But what are we going to do about it? And so
Yeah.
that's a really great life lesson too. So we start with, it's hard, it sucks. Well, what can we do? Like, what would make your life easier? What are teachers you like? What do they do? Oh, what if your math teacher did that? What if we asked your math teacher to do that? It's
I love it.
amazing. It's amazing how that can
Love
all of
that.
a sudden. And so those are things that I just, and again, as an OG tutor or educational specialist, you already know all these things inherently with the reading or writing or whatever it is that you specialize in. So just bringing that over to the math part and being compassionate and empathetic, your students are going to open up in a different way. And I think that's half of what we do a lot of times, is making them feel comfortable. And you might be doing it subconsciously. And so just thinking about consciously what it is that you're doing and applying that to other areas.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I love that. One tip I think we've talked about before was journaling as a way to unlock some of that anxiety. I think we talked about this a few years back, but I had a student, we were journaling, that was part of her lesson plan.
Mm-hmm.
And one day I asked her, tell me about the day you knew you were bad at math. And she immediately knew what to write and just, and then read it out loud to me. And it all started in third grade with timed multiplication tests. Such a bummer. And it had caused all this anxiety because she could not do it, because why? It's in the working memory part of the brain. That's a struggle for her. She didn't matter how many flashcards she did, she could not remember them for the test. And the day that they had their ice cream party for learning math facts, she only got 3 scoops and she knew she didn't earn 2 of them. And the shame, the deep shame. And so just talking about it out loud and then hearing from an adult that it doesn't matter at the end of the day, that you know your math facts. You can do math and let's work on it together. Creating that safe place. Math journaling is huge. And Cynthia on our team just the other day was telling me she's used it heavily this year at school and cannot believe the kinds of things that it did. They had huge growth in their testing this year because she spent time doing multisensory and journaling to lower anxiety. It's
And all
huge.
the research behind that is in the book Choked, and it's very well researched. If for some reason a teacher doesn't believe you or an administrator doesn't believe you, it's all in that book about how important it is.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, what other tips do you have?
Color coding, like that's the because a lot of students think it's fun, and that can then they're focusing on certain things, like just big details, small details, or color coding so they can find the pattern. One of the students that I worked with for Math for Middles this year, I did really, really detailed notes and I just color coded everything. And we were doing, for people who like math at higher levels, partial fractions, which is taught in Algebra 2, but actually isn't really important until you get into calculus and you're doing derivatives and integrals. But so she needs to know it because she's going to have to use it later. But she's like, why is this important? And I did these beautiful color-coded notes, and she's like, oh, that's not hard. And all of a
I
sudden,
love it.
by the way, I just want you to know, it took me years to understand partial fractions myself. So for her to hear it once and see my notes and be like, oh, that's not hard, was just earth-shattering to me as
Wow.
a teacher, to be able to give that to one of my students and not have them experience what I experienced. But then also, she just found the pattern. She saw what was going on. And that's what a good mathematician is. It's just finding the pattern. And that's why Adrienne is so subitizing, number sense, having patterns, finding patterns, because literally math is just finding patterns. And
It
so
is.
when the students can realize that, it's not about speed, it's not about math facts,
Mm-mm.
it's not about looking smart, it's about seeing patterns and being curious. they're going to be mathematicians.
Oh my goodness. Yes, and I'm always harping on that with my students. That's what math's about. It's about patterns, sharing and communicating them. If you discovered the most amazing pattern that changed your life, wouldn't you want to share that with someone? We do that every day. I have a business coach. He shared a pattern with me last night, and I was like, what? That's amazing. What a cool pattern. Now, we didn't like write it down in a formula. No, but he identified the pattern, right? And that's what the essence of math is communicating and sharing patterns with the world around us. I love it. I love it. Love it. So I
And
think, oh, go ahead.
And then the other, like on top of that, what I like to tell students is mathematicians are lazy. And so when we talk about that abstract, it's all about what's the laziest way you can do it and create an abstract. We want to be lazy. We have to be consistent and we can't break math law, but mathematicians are lazy. I mean, the whole point of calculus was Newton just wanted to find something that was easier to write down than what he was doing. He was lazy. And when I start talking about that, it also brings down these myths and breaks down these myths of, math is hard and math is like, you can only be smart to do math. So no, mathematicians are lazy.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden it seems accessible.
I think Marilyn would use, they're efficient. This is
Yes.
efficient. We want to
But
be efficient mathematicians.
and I use the word, and I particularly use the word lazy because a lot of students that I work with in particular, because of their dyslexia or their ADHD or their processing speeds or their dyscalculia, get told that they're lazy a lot. And so I like to flip that script and tell them like, and then when they feel comfortable and they're like realizing, okay, I'm not lazy, then we go to efficiency. So then they can, okay, that's a better word for it. But I mean, helping kids realize that the way that they're thinking is okay if it's slow, that's a huge thing too to help lower anxiety, because that's why a lot of kids won't raise their hand in class, because they don't talk fast enough or they don't process fast enough. And whoever said that had anything to do with intelligence?
Yeah, exactly. I love that. Okay, we're running out of time. The last tip I think we should mention that's fairly quick to say is a near point reference. That's something that can be written into an IEP. Let's tell them what a near point reference would look like for math.
So a lot of kids mislabel it as a cheat sheet, but it's just a reminder to get them to have their mental picture back. And so it's something that's going to trigger their memory, and then they can be like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do. It's not a cheat sheet, because really what it's doing is this is what my joke about calculators. If you don't know what you're putting into the calculator, you don't know what you're getting out. So if you can have this little thing, memory jolter, however you want to call it, to get your picture back, so then you know what the process is that you need to do, it's just a piece of paper. It's not telling you how to do anything. It's going to just jolt your memory, get you back to where you need to go. And that can help decrease anxiety as well, since that's our focus of this little bonus bit, because it's there. A lot of kids don't have to worry about all of a sudden it's gone. That their
Yes,
memory is just gone. And that happens for all the reasons we were talking about, we listed at the beginning. Whatever it is that pulls away your memory, well, now you don't have to worry because it's right there. And you can just, okay, got my picture back. Let's keep going.
absolutely. I love that. I love that tip. Well, I had a blast with you today. Thank you so much for joining me. And to all of you, if you have questions for us, reach out to us over at Math for Middles. Connect with us there, and we'll connect with you all the time. You can tell we're two
I
math
was
nerds.
going to say, we love to nerd out. So if you have a question, we will nerd out hard with it. I promise.
We will. Probably why this session's on the longer side, but thank you for being with us. Like, I apologize to Emily. Like we knew we needed to do it. It's just so juicy. We had to share. We have so much more. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you later.